Hi, welcome to Advanced Music Theory. I'm your host, Michael Everetson, and we're going to be covering 5 advanced theory topics. We'll be looking at poles, reharmonization, secondary dominance, passing diminished chords, tritone substitution, and subdominant minor functions. If this is your first time watching, I encourage you to grab a pen and paper to take notes with. And I would like to remind you that all the examples given will revolve around the key of C. So, without further ado, let's get started. Before we begin, we need to look at major key harmony and quarter functions. We know that in each key there are 7 diatonic chords we can choose from. In the key of C, we have chord 1, C major 7, chord 2, D minor 7, chord 3, E minor 7, chord 4, F major 7, chord 5, G dominant 7, chord 6, A minor 7, and chord 7, B minor 7 flat 5, also known as B half diminished. All of these chords are going to sound good together since they only use notes from the C major scale. I'm sure you would have noticed that each chord has a slightly different sound to it. So how do we organize each chord into groups based on their harmonic integrity? Well, this brings us to something called poles. So what are poles? Well, out of our 7 diatonic chords, we can organize them into groups from most resolved sounding to least resolved sounding. These groups are called poles. We have 3 poles to organize each diatonic chord into. Pole 1 has tonic chords, pole 2 has subdominant chords, and pole 3 has dominant chords. But how do we know what chords belong in which pole? Well, let's take a closer look at each chord's primary function. Pole 3 basically does what it says on the tin. It contains dominant chords. We know that dominant chords have a tritone interval in them. We also know that chord 5 and chord 7 both contain tritone intervals. So let's place chords 5 and 7 into pole 3. In pole 1, we have tonic chords. These chords sound most like home. There isn't any unresolved tension within the chord. The best example of this is chord 1. So, let's put chord 1 into pole 1. If we look at the notes in chord 1, we have C, E, G, and B. If we compare a C major 7 chord to a 3 chord, an E minor triad, we can see that it shares the same notes. Knowing this, we can confidently put chord 3 into pole 1 with chord 1, since they both utilize the same notes. Now, let's take a look at the notes in chord 6. We have A, C, E, and G. This gives us an A minor 7 chord. But what happens if we put this chord into first inversion? Just by rearranging the notes, we now have a C major 6 instead of an A minor 7. A minor 7 and C major 6 share the exact same notes. And we know that, just like C major 7, C major 6 is a tonic chord, so we can confidently put chord 6 into pole 1. Our final two chords are chord 2 and chord 4. But where do they belong? They don't share very many notes with the tonic chords, but they also don't contain any tritone intervals. So, since these chords, 2 and 4, are not tonic chords or dominant chords, they must be subdominant chords and belong in pole 2. Pole 2 contains subdominant chords, and subdominant chords are a middle ground from tonic and dominant chords. Subdominant chords don't sound as abrasive as dominant chords, since they don't contain any tritone intervals. However, they don't necessarily sound like home because they don't share enough notes with the chords 1, 3, and 6. And now we have it. We know what poles are. There are three groups which categorize each diatonic chord by its primary function. Now we're ready to move on to the next part of this video, and I'm going to talk about reharmonization. Okay, so let's look at a fairly basic chord progression. How do we successfully reharmonize this using poles, but without disrupting its harmonic functionalization? Well, we can interchange any chord within its pole group and it will still maintain its harmonic integrity while also changing the sound of the chord progression. For example, we can swap out any 4 chord with a 2 chord, since they're both subdominant chords, and vice versa. We can swap out any 7 chord with a 5 chord, since they're both dominant chords, and vice versa. We can interchange any 1, 3, or 6 chord with each other, since they're all tonic chords. Let's put a basic melody over top of this chord progression. Now, let's change each chord in relation to what pole it belongs to. Notice how the melody still works over top of these chords, just like it did with the previous chord progression. Congratulations! Now you know what poles are and how to reharmonize. In the next video, we're going to be talking about secondary dominants. I'm your host, Michael Albertson, and thank you very much for watching.